In Australia, the state of Victoria's treasurer announced the state government's decision to repay all of the electric vehicle taxes to drivers that had paid money, including interest, after the tax was deemed unconstitutional. And you've probably heard this in the media, but it is worth digging into a little bit. The road user charge required electric vehicle drivers initially to pay 2 cents per kilometre to the state. And so initially that was 2 cents. It went up within weeks, and it went up to, I think it was 2.7 and then to 2.8 or something like that. Was it 2.6 and then to 2.8 cent per kilometre? The tax was then challenged in the High Court by 2 Victorian electric car owners. Good on them, I think. Christopher van der Stock and Kathleen Davis. And if you're watching this, Christopher or Kathleen, they argued that the tax was an illegal excise which only the Commonwealth is permitted to impose. So for those of you that don't really understand what the Commonwealth means or what it is, the definition in this case is it's an international association consisting of the UK together with states that were previously part of the British Empire and dependencies. In October, the High Court agreed with the challenge by these 2 Victorian people, and they found the Victorian tax unconstitutional. I'm Ben Alexander. Thank you for joining me. Welcome to the channel if you're new. I make EV news videos every day, and occasionally I miss a day, but generally it's every day. I do 1 or 2 videos every day, and I talk about the latest EV news from around the world. The Treasurer in Victoria, Tim Pallas, stated that the government was identifying the individuals to be rebated and then would go through the process of making those rebates. He also mentioned that the government decided to pay interest on these funds even though there was no obligation to do so. So that's incredibly cocky, I think, given that they are trying to pat themselves on the back after trying to shaft people for cleaning up the local area in Victoria. The total amount expected to be repaid is about 7 million Aussie dollars, and the process is anticipated to take a few months, 2, 3, 4 months, something like that. And I would no doubt expect that you'll probably need to apply in some way in the end, or take the time out of your day to ask for it back. I don't think you're likely to get a letter or an email with a cheque, for example, because I just don't think that's how it works in Australia. Christopher van der Stock expressed surprise and happiness at the refund decision, stating that the legal challenge was never about the money, but about the principle, which I'm also a big believer in, in principles. I don't know if the Victorian government are, though. So he believed that the tax penalised the wrong drivers and acted as a disincentive for motorists to switch to electric vehicles, which is a fantastic point. Can they just start now taxing people that drive 4-litre Fords with Bauer engines, the really grumbly ones, around with bull bars on, the bull bars on the front in suburbia? Can they just start taxing those people instead, and do something like that? The case coincided with various schemes by Australian states and territories and the Commonwealth, which were all designed or thought to be designed to increase the number of electric cars on the roads. Notably, the federal government introduced the electric car discount. While Victoria was the only state to tax EV drivers briefly, the court ruling has now called into question similar levies planned by other states, such as New South Wales, for example. So while some states are giving rebates and aiding people to buy EVs, other states are thinking, how can we tax these people immediately? Like I imagine it's not long before they do this in Queensland, and I just think that's a disincentive. It is an outright disincentive, I think, isn't it? So it's really sad. It's not really a win, I don't think, because of course at some point in the future we will all end up paying a road user tax at some point, because they can't take it from petrol or diesel sales anymore. The only quantifiable way they can do this is just by how far you drive every year, give you some tax on that. At this stage, they should be incentivizing people to buy EVs, clean up local air in cities and suburbia. Things like free parking in cities, other things like that, that they've done in Norway. We don't have tolls. In Norway, they're called bompenger. I don't think we have that sort of thing here. I think we do have that on some of the bridges, but they're privately owned, aren't they? You have the big bridge that goes north to south in Brisbane. If we could do things like that, make those things free for EVs, and then just not be so fickle. I noticed in Australia, a very common thing, rules come in and out on a yearly by yearly or bi-yearly basis. So you never feel like there's no stability in when they do things, because things are often reversed immediately. Think back to the border closures in in Australia, and people were driving their caravans into New South Wales, and they couldn't get home for months, so they had to sleep on the border to try get back into Queensland. And you were given a day or two's notice, and that's not good, really, because it's very big in Australia. So you definitely need quite a few hours to get places sometimes. So there's got to be some other incentive that would work in this setting, I think, other than let's just give a very large public sizable sum of money to people that are well off enough to buy 1, 2 EVs. I know a handful of people with multiple $60, $70, $80,000 EVs here in Australia, which is clearly a dividing thing to do, to give those well-off people some money. Don't hate me for that, I'm sorry. Because I know it irritates people and divides society a little bit when that sort of thing exists. Because it's, let's give someone who can afford 70 grand, 3 grand. That's not good when there's a homeless crisis. I don't think anyone could really argue for that. But we can make it so that people might want to switch to an EV by giving them, I don't know, easier parking in the cities, things like that. Maybe slightly, certain taxes that are a bit lower, something a bit less in your face than just give them 3 grand when they go spend 60 grand. So if I was to walk in a shop and spend $64,000 on a Tesla, to give me 4 grand is a bit of an injustice to those people sleeping in tents tonight in the city. So that's what's going on here. I've always sort of been partly for rebates because it is an incentive. I'm all for incentives, but perhaps we should just be more picky with them, maybe. It also most likely ups the price when we do that, when we give a rebate. So we literally saw this a couple of times last year. For example, when the BYD Dolphin was released, literally nobody mentioned this, as far as I can see, other than me. And when that was coming out, BYD said, this is the price, roughly, that it's going to be. The Queensland government and New South Wales government, had sort of been talking about rebates. The Queensland government said it's going to be 3 grand. And lo and behold, when the price is now announced from BYD, it's gone up 3 grand. It's pretty blatant stuff, but nobody talks about it. I ran a poll on this, and actually a very large majority of you share this sentiment. So we should probably not be a big fan of it, I guess, at this point then, right? I don't know. I've always been a fan of rebates and, in trying to get people to buy EVs. That's a really important thing, especially because diesel, if you look at I think it's the Cancer Council website, they have data on there, and they publicly state that the second largest cause of cancer in Australia, outside of skin, the sun and skin cancer, is because of diesel particulates, basically the stuff that comes out of diesels. So ironically, it probably isn't helping very much, or at least as much as we'd like to think it is when we have these rebates. So my question to you all is it's actually 2 questions. When should we all start to pay a road tax or road user tax in our EVs? At some point in the next 10 years. And how much is reasonable? One other concern that I have is at the point in which we do have, or maybe we've found a sort of equilibrium with regards to paying a road user tax. Again, this is just another point in the last 100 years or the last 50 years in history where we've lost some element of freedom, and we are now basically, we need to pay some money, an unspecified amount of money, and the government tell us what to pay. And if we don't pay it, we're buggered, basically. We're in bother. So you have no choice. If you want to, move yourself around in a car, you have to pay that money. They can ask for 10 cents per kilometre. And if you whinge, you will have no legs to stand on. So we have to pay it, whatever it is. So you just have to trust that you have a good government that is looking out for your best interest. in 2023 is a concern, isn't it? So basically, we can drive if we're well off enough to drive, and we pay money directly to governments, which incidentally, in certain parts of the world, are quite blatantly dodgy. So how do you all think is best to proceed with this? Should we be sort of not so keen on being so open about the inevitability of a road user charge? Should we be trying to come up with other solutions, or just be okay with that? Because it is a concern. If they ask, if the government say, EVs are super cheap, they're really good for everyone, go buy one. 20 years from now, you can imagine that it's going to cost the same to run an EV as it is a petrol or a diesel, because the government are thinking, well, 20 years ago, these people were happy to pay, 10 or 20 cents per kilometre. So instead of paying the petrol stations this now, they can just pay us, which is great, isn't it? They obviously have that mindset based on the fact that, speed cameras in Queensland last year earned $500 million. And the Queensland have said, the government have said, in the next 2 or 3 years, they're going to spend $500 million installing more cameras in Queensland. There's a lot of money in this for the Queensland government. So you have to think, is it ever really going to be staying at 2 or 3 cents or 4 cents or 5 cents? Are they ever going to cap it at something that you'd be quite happy with or excited about? I don't think so. I really don't think this is going to happen. So this is a very complex issue. I know some people have actually been saying these sort of things in the comments. I feel somewhat at a loss for this. I really do. And it's always irrelevant what they introduce this charge to be at, because that is not the price at its equilibrium. That's the soft blow price. So initially when they bring these things in, just like they did in Victoria, they might say in the UK, for example, it's just going to be 1 cent per kilometre. We will not up it for a year. And then they apologise and they up it within a year. That's just a soft blow. We know this because A, it's common sense. This is how it works. And B, this is literally what's being gone around the world in different countries with regards to the road user charge. Victoria, for example, only took weeks to raise the price multiple times. So it went from 2, I think, to 2.6 and then 2.8, I think, all in the space of something like a month or two. So you can see my concern here. I think this is worth talking about a little bit. How should we proceed? Feel free to use the comment section to voice your opinion, good or bad. It's okay. I respond to the comments if you want a response, and I read them all. And actually, loads of you read other people's comments. So when you're writing a comment, it's not actually going directly to me. It's sort of in the public sphere. So it's a really useful thing to have, I think, the comment section. Even if you don't like some things I say, that's okay. We're all entitled to an opinion. So thank you so much for watching to the end, folks. And can I ask you all to consider as well subscribing if you're a regular watcher? I can see that quite often, well over 90% of you aren't subscribed, but you return back to the channel as regular viewers, and it's really lovely. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your morning or evening. Depends when you watch this.